Hello and welcome to this special edition of the ILEETA Learning Lab. My name is Joe Willis. I'm the Deputy Executive Director, and today I'm talking to John Weiss III. He's a Deputy Sheriff out of Florida and an incredible instructor who's very passionate about a wide variety of topics, but definitely as a firearms instructor. And at ILEETA, he's going to be talking about a brief and incomplete history of gunfighting, which is as fascinating as it sounds. And so I'm just going to turn this right over to you, John. Thank you so much for being a part of ILEETA 2026. Tell us what we're going to learn about.
So if you've ever stood in the firing line and been told to do something and then asked yourself, why are we doing it this way? All right. Well, there's reasons, and we rarely get those reasons. So I'll give you the backstory to the class. So I'm a member of another organization called the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors. And when I was a young baby cop, I got this much support from my own agency. And I went to ILEETA, and people took me under their wing and they mentored me, and it made me a better instructor. So a couple of years ago, their annual training conference is a week-long training conference. It was in Palm Bay, Florida. It was just a few hours drive from the house. There's no excuse for me not to go. And I go up there and the training day was done, and we're lounging in the lounge, having some adult beverages. And I'm sitting there talking with a gentleman named Michael Johnson, longtime ILEETA. Matter of fact, he was the catalyst to get me to ILEETA. Another board member, and we were talking about the state of affairs and what's going on and training and techniques. And I kind of lamented that we have these young bucks coming up who are very talented operators. They can run a gun. But if you ask them why, they have no idea. And I felt that was kind of sad that we have this rich history. So Mark Fettinger was there, and he goes, well, what do you mean? So off the top of my head, I start explaining some of the technologies and some of the gunfighters and some of the people in the past and their discoveries, their techniques still echo with us today as police officers. We're still doing things that people did in the 1920s. All right. And he looks at me and he goes, I'd like to see that at a class next conference. And because I'd been drinking, I stupidly said yes. Yeah. So it reminds me of Ernest Hemingway had a quote. He says, always do what you say you're going to do when you're drunk, because it'll teach you to keep your mouth shut. And a lot of research later and a lot of going down rabbit holes, I put together a class at Las Vegas. I gave it, and everything went wrong. The computer wouldn't work. The screen wouldn't work. I was 40 minutes behind. It's a 4-hour class. The screen wouldn't work. I lost my notes. I teach a 4-hour class from memory, and I just was my, stomach's in knots. And I'm like, my God, I'm going down in flames. This is just hideous. And I got done, and a guy in the back of the class comes up and he says, I've been a police officer 24 years, and this is the first time in my career I've had a 4-hour class with no breaks. And I thought, what have I done? My God, no wonder I'm getting a stink eye from everybody. I said, why didn't you just get up and go? He goes, I couldn't wait for the next slide. And that was the morning session. And then in the afternoon section, the room was packed. And it kind of took off from there. And then Mike Johnson said, you should submit that to ILEETA. And I thought, I can't go to ILEETA. I'm a nobody from a nobody agency. Who am I? Who am I to get up there and teach nationally in this? And he convinced me. He goes, no, they don't. You just put in for the class. Put in for the class. I think you should put in for. So I said, all right. So he pushed me out of my comfort zone, and thank God he did, because ILEETA. Listen, if you're listening to this right now and you're not a member of ILEETA and you do anything in law enforcement that involves teaching somebody else what to do, stop what you're doing, go online, register, and come to St. Louis. It will be a life-changing event. It was for me. I sat there and all I thought was, why didn't someone teach me this 20 years ago? Every year I go, I learn something, and when I leave, I'm changing course. I'm doing things differently now because of
it's
what
just
I
those slight variations in course, because overall, the best instructors, as you just said, come to ILEETA. And by far, you are among that audience, John. When I've
Oh,
seen you train, I
you humble
am
me.
enamored. And like you said, as you were describing, and I've heard the story of your first experience teaching it in the past, and so I knew how that was going to end. But even not knowing, I was like, I don't think it went badly. I think it was one of those things where you had that imposter syndrome, that feeling in your gut. But I know, like any other audience I've seen, they're on the edge of their seat waiting for what's next. So let's get right after that. When we talk about the history of gunfighting and knowing what it is, like, sure, we stand on the firing line, we can get all the technique down on how to pull a trigger, how to breathe, how to even move, change levels, all that kind of stuff. That's great. But when you talk about the history of how we got there, and I know you've got a great opening story on the revolver and that kind of stuff, I'm very excited. So, kind of walk us through a little bit of some of the research you've done and maybe some of the interesting things you've learned along the way. Obviously, we've only got a couple of minutes here, so you can't give away your whole class anyway. But don't give away the best stuff. But tell us some of the interesting things.
Well, yeah. So, how to do my research? Spent a lot of time online, and my uncle Richie, my beloved Uncle Richie, whom I miss terribly, he was a gunsmith in Connecticut at Colt, and he was a amazingly talented craftsman. So I got a lot of his books when he passed away, and he collected Colt books. So I had information there. I had there's a magazine called True West magazine, and if you like cowboys and the American West, phenomenal source of information. And then things like cities where these gunfights occurred or these gunslingers used to hang out. Their Chamber of Commerce, right? They're selling that today. You can go to their Chamber of Commerce and they'll show you the Indian caves that Doc Holliday went to because they thought if you breathed the air from these Indian caves that it would cure your tuberculosis. And that's why he died in Colorado. That, and he was chased out because some people wanted to hang him for murder, but Indian caves are a good reason to go too.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so there's that. And I guess I'm naturally curious and easily entertained.
So in our history, we have this lore of gunfights happening in the street, shooting people down like dogs and 40 paces
Yeah,
or whatever. And what's some of the realities of that? Like,
this is in the class. This is a true story. So at one time, Springfield, Missouri was a trailhead. That was it. That was like the end of civilization. Then this great gap of the unknown until you hit California. So Wild Bill Hickok was there, and he was a gambler. So that was a legit way to make a living back then. And you would borrow money called staking. I'd give you money, and then you'd go gamble it, and then you'd keep some of the winnings, and you give me my investment back plus a little more. And he had a friend named David Tutt. And some say David was jealous because Wild Bill was a better gambler or whatnot. But one day during a game, he got up and he accused Wild Bill of owing him money. And he reaches across the table and he picks up Wild Bill's pocket watch. And he says, I'm going to keep this as collateral. Well, this was a massive insult. And of course, you're losing face. But Wild Bill was a gentleman. Unlike the show Deadwood, the old series, one of my favorites, he didn't curse. He was never known to curse. He didn't say anything because Tut was his friend. Well, over the course of the week, things just disintegrate. They just get worse and worse until Tut announces to a mutual friend that he's going to wear Wild Bill's watch downtown. And Wild Bill's response was to the effect of, there'll be a dead man walking. So a man of few words, but you probably should listen to him. So Wild Bill was known for carrying a pair of Colt Navy 36 cap and ball revolvers, and he carried them reverse grip. And Saturday comes, and the whole town knows about it by now, and they're going back and forth trying to get these two to reconcile. Wild Bill's proud, Tut's stubborn, doesn't work out. And someone comes and tells Wild Bill, David's downtown wearing your watch. So word gets out, Wild Bill's coming. Tut knows he's coming. And From 75 yards away, they see each other. And Wild Bill says, words the effect of, Dave, you best not be wearing my watch. And they drew their pistols. And even though there are dozens of witnesses, no one knows who fired first. That's how quickly these men drew and fired. But the difference is that Wild Bill put his forearm up and he rested his Colt across his forearm. And from a distance of 75 yards, one shot from the holster, Tut stumbles back, walks over, puts his hand on a building, says, words to the effect of, Bill, you done killed me. Boom, drops down dead. And of course, chaos ensues. Wild Bill is arrested on the scene for murder. 3 days later, he walks out of the courtroom a free man, the jury saying, well, Tut shouldn't have done that. So that's one of my favorite stories ever of jury nullification.
Right.
And I taught a pistol class, or taught a revolver class specifically, and I have a Colt single action Army. Now that's a pretty modern gun, right? It's about 40 years or 30 something years after the Colt 36, which Wild Bill had. Now it's black powder cap and ball, but it's similar enough. And I have my students walk back. I said, it's not the maximum effective range of the gun, it's maximum effective range of you. How far can you hit with it? And we walked them back to 75 yards and shooting a steel torso. And then, I recall that story to them, and they just blows their mind that somebody would be that good and that quick at 75 yards. And back then, the sights were teeny tiny little sights on the guns.
Right. Just beads.
Almost salutary.
What do you know, at this point, about his training and preparation, and any insight on that? Any thoughts on it?
So, of course, he was tragically murdered in Deadwood, but he had written a letter. And it was in the court. It somehow made it into the court records at Deadwood. And in the 1940s, Rex Applegate, another great American gunfighter story that I'll save for the class.
All right. I like it.
He found this letter, and I found a video of him reading the letter. And in the letter, Wild Bill says, even though it took him a half a second longer, he always brought the gun up to his eye level. So do I know if he had a perfect sight picture, or, as Jeff Cooper liked to say, a flash sight picture? I don't know, but he would bring it up to eye level, and he said that's what made the difference. And here was a guy that could take two pistols, point them out in opposite directions. He'd put a bottle on a fence post, a bottle on a fence post, and from about 20 yards away, he'd hold one of his revolvers in each hand. He'd simultaneously fire and hit both, even though he couldn't see both of them at the same time.
Right, man.
So that's a trick that exhibition shooters have been repeating ever since.
Sure. And I guess that's all part of the history and the lore and the fascination, and wielding two pistol thing that clearly is part of it. Interestingly, though, I've heard you refer to gunfighting as the American martial art. What do you mean by that?
Totally not my idea, but it is, right? We can look at the French, and they needed to fight on board ship, right? So they came up with their style of kickboxing because it was designed to be on a moving platform that was off balance. Savate is the martial art, right? And of course, the Japanese had katanas, right? So you have Iaido and you had Jitsu and all these other derivative martial arts. And the Filipinos were subjected by pretty much everybody that's ever come on their island. So they had to fight with whatever was laying around. Okinawan martial arts, the same thing, right? They're tonfa. All those are all farmer tools that have been modified. Well, in 1836, Sam Colt invents the revolver. And it's not that multiple firing pistols didn't exist. We have one that goes back to the late 1400s that was made for an officer, a Dutch officer. But it was kind of a one-off, and it wasn't. And then we have Collier and Artemus Wheeler invented a flintlock revolver, and there's a great story about that, which I'll save for the class, about Sam Colt. And so it's been attempts before, but with a flintlock, you have a pan and there's powder, And if the powder falls out of the pan, well, it doesn't work, right? So if we're revolving, we're dumping the powder out. So they had to solve that problem of, well, how do I put the powder in there? So the hammer that came down would actually throw a little bit of powder into the pan just as the flint was hitting the frizzen to make the spark to go into the pan.
Okay.
Very complicated. And they did this by hand, right? They didn't have machine lathes.
Right.
This is all done by hand. And they're getting tolerances like within 1,000ths of an inch. So,
wow.
But Sam Colt was the first one to make a reliable, somewhat affordable handgun that had multiple shots. So before, right, and if you were, you're a pretty tough guy, long time in the military. If you had a sword, you'd be walking around like, I'm Joe with my sword. I'm going to win a lot of fights, right? And then Conan the Barbarian shows up. You're like, oh, I'm so
screwed. Win this one. I
need something. I wanted this one, right? Or Miyamoto Musashi, right? And he got beat by a stick. So now someone of average skill could beat anybody of any size, of any strength, of any skill level, provided you were a decent shot. It changed warfare and conflict much the way that the crossbow in Europe made plates of armor kind of obsolete. They were outlawed because they were very slow to fire, but they were powerful enough to go through chainmail and plate armor. So now mere peasants could kill knights and landed gentry. Well, we can't have that.
So when you envision this class, when you first set out and you're sitting around having some beverages and kind of chatting about it, what was your ultimate vision in putting this together? What were you thinking and where'd you want to go with it?
Well, after I started putting it together, I realized I wasn't thinking.
Valid.
Kept my mouth shut. But here's what I would like. Ultimately, I would like, if you come to class and you do any kind of firearms instruction, or maybe you work in forensics, maybe you're the guy that, works in the armory. Maybe you're the one that, has to catalog guns and make sure they don't rust to pieces before they go to trial. I want you to understand that the history of gunfighting, it's your history, right? It's not history that's over there by these other guys. It's your history. This is your inheritance. And it's our job to pass that on to the next. Now that I'm a little grayer in hair and longer in the tooth, I feel that it's my job as an instructor to keep growing. This is why I keep coming back to ILEETA, and you guys haven't locked the doors on me yet. So, like a stray cat, you feed me, you can't get rid of me.
That's right. Keep coming back.
But I want the opportunity to pass what's been given to me on to somebody else, right? I don't want to be that lampstand under a bushel basket. Right? And so I would tell you this, instructors, if you're out there and you're passionate about something, or even if you're just good at something and it's law enforcement related, and any part of your job is getting somebody else to also be good at that thing, come to ILEETA. Come to ILEETA. It will alter the course of your career. And it's, when maybe at your agency you get critiques, they're ad hominems, they're personals, the critiques are a little snarky, and it's more like, oh, you're coming up and now you're a threat to my position, so I have to push you down. ILEETA, ego-free. If somebody gives you a critique, it's not because they're trying to knock you down, it's they're trying to build you up. They want to give you the skills where you have the best presentation possible. And that's one thing I love about it, is that we're all there to lift each other up and everybody wins. That rising tide lifts all ships. And ILEETA is, I'm really blessed to be able to be a part of it. And I'm flattered and humbled that you invite me back.
Well, and John, I may have mentioned this at the beginning of this call, and I know you and I have talked about it separately. The instructional style you use is narrative. It is storytelling. It is grounded in science and history, but the delivery is yours and unique. And what I'm curious about is, as you look at this in the gunfighting space, definitely it's our history as you described it. Are there other aspects of law enforcement training where this sort of dig into the richness of how we got where we are and be able to convey that with passion is replicable? Is this something that transfers to, I don't know, let's say forensics?
Sure. Right. When I build a lesson plan, whether it's telling the story of gunfighting or tactical shotgun or low powered variable optics, which you guys let me teach a couple years back.
We were grateful you did.
And listen, like I said, I'm always humbled and pleased, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to spend a week with really, everybody at ILEETA. If you're watching this and you're not in ILEETA, everybody who goes to this conference is there to be better. You might get a couple slugs who are sent there by their boss, but Darwinian pressure weeds them out of the gene pool very quickly. They don't last. People there they share your passion. So come join us with, genuine fellowship.
No doubt.
But I look at it this way, right? Everything to me is a story necessarily. And whatever the lesson plan is, you should tell it like a story. It should have a beginning, a middle, pardon me, and an end. Right. And when you get to the end, the beginning and the middle should make sense. Now, do you have to tell them in that order? Not necessarily. Like I like movies. Quentin Tarantino, he's famous for structuring his stories starting in the middle, and you're like, wait, what? And then through backstories and flashbacks. Oh, okay. And then you get to the end, and you're like, now it makes sense.
Yes.
And your presentation is like that.
And I enjoy doing it that way. And I'll tell you, I was a little bit inspired by you in watching you present with that, because there's a fascinating like way to connect that. And I like how you mentioned Tarantino's approach to it. I've never really thought of Tarantino as a trainer, but seeing it that way and how he tells the story. And so when I saw you present this in Virginia at the Team One conference, it wasn't the history of gunfighting one. What was it you taught there? It was a different class.
I think it was a police work.
Yeah,
I started with the law.
Back history of law enforcement. Yep, that's right. And the connection between the beginning, middle, and end. And there were times where I felt like we were at the end of the story and really it was just beginning. And other times where you were wrapping it up before you started. It was just, and I think as I watched that, I was like, imagine someone teaching Graham that way, or imagine someone teaching the history of how DNA began to, like, there are some incredibly dry topics out there. Right.
The history of DNA is a fascinating history.
Right.
And again, it's a story, right? Somebody just sit around and go, what's this? Oh, look, it's DNA. It's got to,
right.
The pitfalls, the stumbles. I've watched documentaries on that and mind blowing.
But I think, when you look at the collection of it being such a really, like, the just biometric collections in general are rather mundane, very task oriented, swabbing, whether it's, retinal scans, whatever. But at the same time, if someone who is passionate about conveying knowledge and truly cares about the emotional connection and transfer.
Sure. And just think about DNA, right? We can go all the way back to Sir Francis Bacon. Why Sir Francis Bacon? Well, scientific method didn't exist.
Right.
Why is it so methodical? Well, because we're doing science, we're doing chemistry. Right. And then we have Brocard's theory of transfer. Right. Now we have the very earliest modern forensics in France. Right. All the way to it was 1960 something, late 60s, early 70s, when they said, wait a minute, there's this molecule that seems to tell every other thing what it's going to be. And then figuring out, well, wait a minute, it's not working. Why isn't it working? Oh, it's the wrong shape. It's really a double helix. It's not one long string.
I think I figured out your 27 class. If you haven't already, I've got some ideas for you. Yeah, a brief and incomplete history of forensics. I'll tell you, this is the thing, and this is what really fascinates me about the storytelling version of training. It goes back to cave drawings. It goes back to every culture all around the world. It's passed from generation to generation in this way that truly connects. And I feel like sometimes in the training space, we often find ourselves simply flipping through a slide and saying, these are the bullets. And even if you're a great presenter, it's still just imparting knowledge on someone. But when you can truly connect it to a story and you draw people in and you make them anticipate what's next, there's something that happens there, and you've seen it firsthand, and many of us have. And it's the reason we'll sit and watch Netflix on a documentary for as long as we will, because we want to know where this goes. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I
very
sat and
exciting.
watched the documentary on the robot on Mars that lasted for
Okay.
15 years. But I'm like, I'm in tears because this robot died. I'm like, it's a machine. Why am I crying? I'm just so wrapped up in the story. And the people, who grew attached to this thing, they've never seen it because it's on Mars. All they see is data on a screen, and they're playing it music to wake it up. And they're.
Right. Yeah. And, the interesting thing is, too, you take that one about the rover on Mars, we know how it ends, right? We
Yeah.
know what's going to
Yeah.
happen here. But at the same time, the journey to get it there, the day-to-day interactions with it, what it gave us, it's all so fascinating.
How they solve problems on another planet.
Right.
You can't go just,
that
tire's
far
broken.
away.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't call them AAA.
Need a little mini tow truck. Yeah. And I think there is not a topic in this space, wellness, armor, firearms, forensics, evoc, nothing happened without a story getting us there. I mean, just look at the development of the suspension packages on our pursuit vehicles. That didn't happen without both victories and tragic losses, right? And each one of those was a milestone marker on the progress we've made to the, we've now got, major SUVs, massive vehicles that can, handle like
sports cars.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen on accident. It didn't happen without a story. And I'll tell you, brother, that's genuinely what I see and what I'm hoping people who attend your class. Sure. I mean, I kind of want to go hear the rest of those stories, even though I think I've heard a couple of them. I want to hear them again, like the Mars rover, right? But what I really hope people get, and I think you shared this with me, is that it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. There's a passion, there's a story, and you can convey it this way.
Yeah. And when you're conveying your story, I think it's very important to just give a crap about what you're talking about. You have to care.
Not much simpler than that.
Yeah. If you don't care, it's never going to work. You have to care about what you're doing. Even if you don't like the subject, you have to care about your students. Your audience has to sit there. And as a police trainer, how many times have you sat through a class and you thought, I'm going to take my number 2 pencil, get it as sharp as I possibly can. I'm going to stab myself in the eyes just to get out of here.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. The only thing keeping me in this room is the fact that this agency pays me and I have to stay here. Right. Then that is the worst possible place to be in as an instructor. And I think you could take the most dry thing and make it matter. And I'll tell you, as much as, and I can, and I know I can because we have sit around and talk to you for hours. I enjoy it. It's fun for me. But unfortunately, we are coming to the end of this 20 to 30 minutes we're trying to spend on these. And so over to you, kind of some final thoughts on, if I come to your class, what am I leaving with?
You're leaving with context, right? Just as information isn't evidence until we put it into a context. When you're at the line and you're doing a speed reload, you can say, you know what, Ray Chapman invented this, and I know who Ray Chapman is, and I know where he went and where he come from, and I'm carrying this on. You can understand why we don't fight with revolvers. What happened? What changed that? Why are patrol rifles around? We just assume they're there like air. It's present. So I try to give you the history of where these things came from, why we do what we do. And when someone says, well, how come, you're not going to stand up there and go, well, because that's just how we do it here. Right? That's a very dissatisfying answer to give somebody who's genuinely curious. And we're cheating our students when we do that. They're asking because they're curious. It's the ones who sit in the back of the room and just like, when's lunch break? Right? We're not going to, we don't teach them because they're just not teachable. But when they're asking good questions, you need to provide good answers. And when they understand that this isn't just something I do, this is something I'm a part of. I'm participating in this big story. And I might be just a tiny little, comma in a sentence, but I'm in the story.
I'm in the story, dude. I'll tell you, I can't wait. It'll be so. I can't recall off the top of my head what day it is, but check the schedule wherever you are for it on the ILEETA schedule.
I think it's Wednesday, unless it's
Wednesday.
changed.
And
Yeah.
no, I don't think I've moved it. And the it's a 3 hour and 45-minute session, but I will tell you it's time well spent, and you will learn things that you never even imagined you would learn. And so, John, thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for getting us prepped and ready. And if you cannot make it to the ILEETA conference, sure, there were some nuggets in here, but if you're curious about this is just one of over 120 great sessions happening at the ILEETA conference and Expo. And as John mentioned a few different times up to this point, everyone there is an instructor going through very similar things. You will find your tribe at ILEETA. John, stick
Okay.
around with me for a couple of minutes. I got a couple other questions to follow up with you on.
Will
Thank
do,
you so
sir.
much.
Thank you for having me. It's been my honor, very humbled.